You know, in any creative field, there's always the same question. How do you follow a genius? Well, today we're diving into a moment when classical music hit a wall, and one composer decided that instead of climbing it, he'd just blow a hole right through it. This is the story of how Franz Liszt broke music and made it better. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's the early 1800s. Beethoven has just taken the symphony to a level that, frankly, nobody thought was possible. It felt perfect, complete. So for every composer coming after him, there was this huge, terrifying question looming over them. What's left to do? Where do you possibly go from here?
And look, this wasn't just a few composers having a crisis of confidence. It was a widespread feeling. The critics, the audience, everyone felt that new symphonies were just, well, not as good as Beethoven's. The art form felt exhausted. It was like composers were stuck writing in the shadow of this colossal genius.
Which brings us right to our first section, a genuine crisis in music. The symphony, the biggest, most ambitious thing you could write for an orchestra, seemed to have hit a dead end. That traditional four-movement structure, the fast part, then the slow part, it used to be a powerful blueprint, but now it felt more like a creative straitjacket. It was becoming clear that if music was going to move forward, it couldn't just follow the old maps. It needed a whole new way to tell a story. And this is where our hero, Franz Liszt, steps onto the stage. He looked at the problem and didn't just suggest a new rule, he invented a whole new game. He called his invention the Symphonic Poem, and the idea was totally radical. First off, get rid of those four separate movements. This was going to be one single continuous piece of music. And its job wasn't just to sound nice. Its job was to bring something from outside of music to life. A story, a painting, a character, you name it. And what could it be about? Literally anything. A poem, a novel, a painting you just saw in a gallery, a beautiful landscape. Liszt wanted to smash the walls between the arts. He wanted the concert hall to be a place where music, literature, and painting all came together in one powerful emotional experience. So that's the what, an amazing idea. But the how he actually pulled it off, is where you see his real genius at work. He needed a completely new blueprint. So think about a normal symphony, four distinct chunks of music. Stop, start, stop, start. What Liszt did was take the idea of those four movements, the dramatic opening, the slow, beautiful part, the lively dance, and the big finish, and he melted them all together into one seamless journey. It has the emotional weight of a full symphony, but it flows like a single unfolding story. Now, to keep this new, long form from falling apart, he used a couple of brilliant tools. The first is something called cyclic form. This is where a main melody shows up near the beginning, and then it keeps coming back. It's like a recurring character in a movie, reminding you what the story is all about and tying the whole thing together. His second tool, though, was the real game changer, thematic transformation. Okay, imagine a brilliant actor who can play any role. That's what Liszt does with a melody. He'll take one musical idea and completely transform it. He'll change its speed, its mood, its entire character. So a theme that starts out as a heroic fanfare can be twisted and reshaped until it sounds like a sad memory or a menacing threat. It's absolutely incredible. But these ideas, as brilliant as they were, didn't just pop into his head fully formed. No, Liszt had to experiment. He needed a laboratory to test all this stuff out. And that laboratory was his early work for solo instruments. This was his sandbox. This was where he could try things, break the rules on a smaller scale, and really sharpen the tools he'd later use to build his epic symphonic poems. And here's a perfect example of his process. In an early piece, his duo, he did something audacious. He took a well-known mazurka by Chopin, a piece that followed the old rules, and he literally just layered his own brand new experimental structure right on top of it. He was creating a conversation, a musical debate between the old and the new. So what did this experimenting actually sound like? Well, he loved to play with the listener. He'd start a piece just like you'd expect, following the classical rules. And then, bam, he'd throw in a melody that had no business being there. Or he'd build up to a big, satisfying ending and then just not do it. He'd refuse to finish the thought and would instead create this smooth, seamless bridge right into the next idea. And I want to be super clear here. These weren't mistakes. He was doing it on purpose. By leaving all these musical sentences unfinished, he created this restless forward momentum that just pulls you through the music. He was basically rewiring the audience's brains, teaching them how to listen to a story without all the neat and tidy chapter breaks. And once he'd perfected these techniques in his lab, he was ready to unleash them on the world. And believe me, orchestral music would never be the same again. The result was a whole series of masterpieces that are still beloved today. His famous symphonic poems like Les Préludes and even his absolutely massive piano sonata in B minor are all built on this revolutionary foundation that he so carefully developed. And his idea just exploded. It spread like wildfire. Soon you had composers all over Europe taking the symphonic poem and making it their own. Smetana used it to express his love for his homeland. Saint-Saëns in France gave us the chilling Danse Macabre. In Germany, Richard Strauss pushed the orchestra to its absolute limits with the form. And in Finland, Sibelius used it to help forge a national identity. In the end, Liszt wrote just 13 official symphonic poems. Now, 13 might not sound like a lot, but with those 13 pieces, he didn't just write some great music. He launched an entirely new genre that gave composers a fresh, powerful voice for generations to come. Which leaves us with one final thought. What does it really take to invent something new? For Franz Liszt, it was the courage to look at a creative dead end, not as a wall, but as the perfect place to start digging a new foundation. Thanks for watching.